Hello and welcome. Thank you for watching. My name is Wes and this is the Universal Life Church of Massachusetts. And here on this channel we talk about religion, spirituality, enlightenment, awareness, awakening, and other worldly things, as well as the occult and esoteric teachings, ancient knowledge. And if this is your bag, well, hit the subscribe button. That way when I make new videos you won't miss them. You'll be notified. And we are brought to you by the Hippie.com. The Hippie.com is my beekeeping business. And we make honey and candles and everything that you can make, lip balm from the bees. And you can see a link in the description to the Hippie.com. And also the Hippie Explorer is another YouTube channel that I have out there, and we explore New England, doing everything from beekeeping to prospecting and visiting interesting sites around New England. So you can check that out. There'll be a link in the description for that as well. Today we are talking about the subject, is Jim Carrey enlightened? That's the question that so many want to know. Well, you've come to the right place, because you can get a straight answer from someone that talks about this subject very frequently. And before we go into whether he is enlightened or not, we got to explain what enlightenment is, because a lot of people don't know. A lot of people think they are enlightened. And if you think you are enlightened, you can go over and check by going to the video that I have on my channel, Are You Awake? And there's a checklist there, and you can check yourself and to see if you are awake or enlightened or reborn or born again. All these terms are talking about enlightenment. When Jesus spends 3 days in the tomb and is born again, it's talking about enlightenment. That's what all these religions around the world, in their esoteric teachings, in their original ancient teachings, that's what they're talking about. That's what they're trying to explain to you. And one of the biggest misconceptions, misunderstandings from people who don't really understand enlightenment or are unenlightened or unaware, is that enlightenment makes you a better person. That's what they think, and that is completely wrong. If you think enlightenment somehow makes you a better human being, then you are not enlightened. Doesn't make you any better. Some people who learned what it takes and gone through the process of enlightenment are in fear of it, and they're uncomfortable because they wish they could go back and unknow what they know. So don't think, or some people think it's a burden, because you got to see the suffering in the world and you have to watch. Where unaware people don't see it. All they worry about is themselves. That's basically, everything comes from two perspectives in this world: selfishness and selflessness. Everybody has a little bit of both. And some people have more of one than the other. Now, what is enlightenment? What is it? Well, it's a physical thing that happens to your psyche and your brain. Your brain actually activates new brain cells in the frontal lobe of your brain when certain chemicals are released by the pineal gland through the process of enlightenment. And the process is a long and difficult and fearful at times process that a lot of people won't do. Most people don't. Some people fall into it by mistake, but that takes a lot of suffering. And some people did suffer. Jim Carrey had depression for many years. He had his suffering. And we're going to get into some of his quotes a little later to explain that. And when I say, is Jim Carrey enlightened? I'm going to give you my opinion. That's all I can do. I can't say whether or not he definitely is or definitely isn't, but he's definitely on the right path. Enlightenment doesn't end at that point of enlightenment. You then go through, some people go through 3 days of the dark night of souls afterwards. And then your life starts to change once you put things together. So let me briefly go over the process. Now, in order to have this experience, which is called enlightenment, it can happen in many different ways. Some ways through suffering, and some ways through meditation and deep contemplation. But what you're trying to do is, it's all about emotions, your emotions. Now, in Eastern religions, the chakras represent the emotions. The root chakra, it starts at the bottom and goes up to the crown chakra. There are 7 chakras, and they all represent different emotions. The root chakra are your lowest vibrations, emotions. Desire, lust, and suffering, despair. And it rises up to love and understanding at the top. And it changes when you, depending on where you are, what emotions are mostly in your life. Is it despair? Or is it happiness? Well, that is different for everybody. And in order to find enlightenment, you have to be either in complete and utter despair at the bottom or at the top, because there's 2 ways to get there. Because it's a circle, basically. Your emotions go in a circle, because everything has an opposite. There's love and fear, happiness, sadness. Everything in this world has an opposite. And that's one of the teachings that we have to learn about ourselves to change our vibrational rate. Because when you do that, this has been studied, that the cerebral spinal fluid that runs up and down your spine, the 33 vertebrae of your spine, travels at a different rate depending on your emotional state, or vibrational state, as it's called. And when you're in the right vibrational state at the right time of the month, because it's a monthly cycle thing, kind of like a woman's menstrual cycle, all human beings, including men, have this cycle of cerebral spinal fluid going up and down the spine. But at the right time, and the emotions are right, and your psyche is right, the fluid comes in contact with the pineal gland and releases chemicals in your brain, including DMT, and gives you an experience and unlocks answers, because there's knowledge involved in this too. It's not just emotional, it's everything. It is profound, and it does unlock dormant brain cells in your brain, and this has been tested on brain scans on monks who have gone through enlightenment. So it is a physical change, and once you come to that point, you can never go back. It's like finding the answer to a puzzle. You can't go back. You can't unknow something. Maybe if someone could wipe your memory out, then you could start over. But that's what this is doing. An enlightenment is like a reboot, a start of your computer, a rebirth. All right? So that's what it is. And it's not easy to attain. And a lot of people think they are enlightened, even though they haven't gone through the process. They just think they were born enlightened. But that's not how it works. A caterpillar goes through a process and turns into a butterfly. Human beings have this process, and some people die before they ever turn into that butterfly. And there have been books and religions all over the world trying to teach people how to do that. But the problem is unenlightened people don't want to learn that. They want to stay the way they are. That's just the way it is. That's the way it is. You got to have both. So unenlightened people live a life a certain way and talk in a certain way because they have had similar. All enlightened people have gone through the process, so they understand it. So when they're talking with somebody else who understands it, they can tell. And enlightenment itself heightens your senses, the frontal lobe of the brain. When these cells are activated, and you've gone through the dark night of soul, which is a period of time after the initial enlightenment occurs, it heightens your senses. And this is the thing that some enlightened people, this is why we say it's not being any better, because having heightened senses means you can see and hear the suffering of more people. And you can see and hear the lies easier, right and wrong, because you're coming from a selfless place and not a selfish place. And neither one's better than the other, because you need selflessness and you need selfishness to live. Now, what's a good determination? And I think we're talking about Jim Carrey here, and he has mentioned his opinions about Donald Trump. And he's not a supporter of his, because he believes, like I do, that Donald Trump is just tearing the country in two. And the reason for that is because he embraces selfishness. And those who are selfless, there's a divide right there. So I don't know of any enlightened person that, or heard of any. I don't think you can be an enlightened person and support Donald Trump. So right there is a good indicator. If you support Donald Trump and you voted for him, it's very unlikely that you're enlightened, because you don't support such a person that does the things he does. That's just the way it is. Now, that might make some people unhappy, but like I said, pay attention here. Being enlightened doesn't make anybody better. Up is no better than down. Left is no better than right. The ego is what needs to be dissolved in order to become enlightened. So unenlightened people embrace the ego. So anything that attacks them or their beliefs must be destroyed, because that's the ego defending itself. So when I say these things about Donald Trump and supporters, well, those people are going to get angry because their ego is it's the ego there. If they want to learn and they want to grow, then they'd listen and understand what try to understand what I'm getting at here. There are two forces in the world, and everybody's got them: selfishness and selflessness. And I get into that on some other videos, but I don't want to get into it too much here. But those are the two basic forces. It's good and evil. We're talking about good and evil. Selfless is good. Selfishness is evil. Plain and simple. That's what every religion on the earth is teaching. And neither is a basis for legality. We don't look at the law to find out what's moral or right, because a lot of times that's wrong, simply because of the people that make the laws. So I have spoken to some other people that are enlightened, and have gone through the process, and everyone in that community agrees that Jim Carrey has had an experience that he said he has had, and you can see it. I can see it. He has changed, and that's what enlightenment does. It gives you a new perspective on life, because you know things and you see things that you didn't have and couldn't have before. And let's look at some of what Jim Carrey has said. One of the great things that he tweeted out one time when someone asked him if he was enlightened, he said, "An individual can't be enlightened." How do I know that? I don't. Because there is no me. This message has been sent to no one by nothing. And if you're unaware and unenlightened, you won't understand that one bit. It'll just sound like gibberish. What do you mean there's no you? What do you mean there's no you? People get angry. Of course there's me. I know what me is. Me is me. And they'll demand they know who they are. And they'll think that they are their hand. This is me. This is me. But people lose their hand. That people have had their hand amputated in car accidents or whatever. Some soldiers get their legs blown off. Does that mean they're less of themselves? No, they're still them. They're still them. So what is you if it's not this body? And when I unenlighten people, well, that's one of the paths to enlightenment, to figure that out. So when Jim Carrey speaks like this, he understands that there really is no self once you've destroyed the ego. It doesn't exist. You are one with everything. And he understands that. Another thing is, another quote from Jim Carrey is, "You have two choices in life, love or fear. Choose love and don't ever let fear turn you against your playful heart." And I love that quote, because I talk about love and fear frequently. I mean, a lot of the things Jim Carrey will be saying is a lot of stuff you heard here, because we're coming from the same place. I've known Jim Carrey. I don't know him, but I have watched him. He's a famous actor, and I've watched and heard almost every interview that he has had. I've watched every movie he's had. And right after he made Man on the Moon, is when he went through his enlightenment, because he became and jumped into the role of Andy Kaufman and basically became Andy Kaufman during the whole filming. And it was disturbing to the people in the film, and he had talked about it, and it was major. And when he was done, when it was time to not be Andy Kaufman anymore, he realized he didn't know who he was. He realized he could be whoever he wanted to be. And then it started, he started looking at his emotions and who he was. And once you start doing that, you start going down the rabbit hole. And that's what he did. And he looked for himself, and he found it. He found out that it's not there. There is no self. You're the universe. Another quote by Jim Carrey: "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see that that's not the answer." And that's another great quote. I think I've said this myself at times, because people chase money and wealth and fame, like, I mean, he did, but it's not the answer to happiness. And it isn't until you have it. There were times in my life I had everything I could ever want, and I still wasn't happy. I thought it was material things, the next new toy, the next thing I could buy to entertain myself for a little while. But that's what it is. It only lasted a little while, because it wasn't the things, because I was unhappy with who I was. When you're happy with who you are, you don't need things. And that is another great quote from Jim Carrey. So if you can't tell by now, my opinion is Jim Carrey is absolutely 100% without question enlightened. He went through the process, and he said so many, many times. And the way he talks and the things he says, to me, it is. And it's unique and it's refreshing, because there are very few, very, very few people in Hollywood that are. Some that are close. George Carlin was very close, but he really, I don't know if he ever went over the edge, but he was there, and he was in turmoil, and he died of a heart attack, because it's very stressful getting that close to enlightenment and not passing and getting the relief that comes when you actually become. But I don't know. I'm not sure about George Carlin. That's another one for another story, another time. Let me go into another quote by Jim Carrey. I got one or two more here, and I'm going to wrap it up. You can fail at doing what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance of doing what you love. Now, everybody's afraid to fail, and that's what stops people from doing whatever they want to do. Well, I'm doing this because I like it. I enjoy it. I make videos. I don't care if anybody listens or they don't. I do it because I enjoy it. Now, people do listen. People have made comments. Great. They don't. That's fine, too. When I don't want to do it anymore, I won't. But I'm not worried about somebody failing. I'm not worried about that. Sure, I make mistakes. I learn by them, and I change things. That's the way it goes. Got the mistakes you learn by. Do what you love. Life's too short to not to. And one more thing. And this is a big one, too. Jim Carrey said, "Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all your glory." And that is profound. And you see it a lot. I've seen it recently where people act normal themselves, but you put a camera in front of them, and all of a sudden they freeze, because they're thinking about the people that are looking at them. They're worried about what other people will think, and they can't act normal in front of a camera. That's the way it is. I mean, even when I started doing this, the first few takes, but now I just do my thing. You get used to it. Do what you need to do, and do what you want to do to make yourself happy. And if you need acceptance, if you need other people to validate you and approve of you, if you need to get a like, then you're going to suffer your whole life. You know? If people like this video, great. If they don't, that's great. I could care less, because I do this for me, because I enjoy it. And I'm happy other people enjoy it. It does make me happy to make other people happy. And I do this to help, and to help people understand enlightenment a little bit better. All right, that is going to be it. Yes, Jim Carrey is enlightened, and if you don't think so, then maybe you haven't watched him enough and listened to him, because the craziness you hear is enlightenment. Because it does sound crazy to people who are unenlightened, because there's an experience, there's something going on. And enlightened people over time, they tend to blend in more. They stop talking crazy, because when someone becomes enlightened, like Jim Carrey did right after Man on the Moon, you want to scream it to the world, because you just found out the secret of life. And you find out pretty quickly that really nobody cares. Nobody's listening. And then you just kind of sink into the background and change the world in your own way that you can. Jim Carrey, he makes some great artwork, and it's fantastic. And I do some painting myself, and I do this and other things, and it's all with the intent to make people happy. But it may not make some people happy, and that's the way it goes. So until next time, please hit subscribe, put a comment down there if you've got any recommendation for topics you'd like me to discuss or give my opinion. Just let me know, and hit the like button. And until next time, peace.